Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Energy Institute Technical Webinar Series with the topic of focus, Wind Turbine Safety Rules Support Procedure 7, which is the control and management of cross-boundary safety precautions between the Wind Turbine Safety Rules and other safety rules. It's great to see so many of you on the webinar this afternoon, and the attendees keep going up, which is brilliant. So thank you for taking the time out to join us. I'll start by introducing myself and the speakers. So my name is Emma McGyver and I am Technical Manager at the Energy Institute. Key to that is my role as lead support for Safety On, the onshore wind health and safety organisation, which is working to ensure everyone working in onshore wind stays safe and gets home safe at the end of their day. I'm pleased to be joined by Wind Turbine Safety Rules Operational Safety Rules Group members, Stephen Bayliss, who's Field Safety Support Manager at Vestas, and Mark Watson, Advisor Electrical Safety and Operations at Equinor. Mark is also Chair of the Operational Safety Rules Group. So if we continue to housekeeping for this afternoon's session, a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the EI YouTube channel after the event. All participants are muted except for Mark, Stephen and I. Please post questions in the Q&A only and do not post questions into the chat as they will not be picked up. So throughout, please continue to post in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If we move on to the agenda for this afternoon, so this is an overview. I will soon be passing over to Mark, who will introduce the Wind Turbine Safety Rules and Support Procedures, and following this, Mark will pass to Steve to provide an overview of Support Procedure 7 and the updates. Before I do pass to Mark, I would like to give a brief introduction to the Energy Institute. So we move to the next slide, please. So background to the Energy Institute. The Energy Institute is a chartered professional membership body for people who work across the world of energy. Our purpose is creating a better energy future for our members and society by accelerating a just global transition to net zero. And we deliver against this purpose across three broad themes. And you'll see those themes in the next slide. So that is by attracting and developing a diverse energy workforce. If you scroll to the next slide, please, Andrea. So attracting and developing a diverse energy workforce, for example, through our work on professional development and training through our academy and bringing energy professionals together. We convene expertise and evidence to inform energy decision-making, for example, by hosting events like Annual International Energy Week and Awards, which is held in February each year. And we also enable industry to make energy safer, more efficient and lower carbon through our technical programme and delivery of industry technical guidelines, which are used globally. We are the independent custodian of technical and innovation expertise for the global energy sector, helping to accelerate the energy transition through industry collaboration, dialogue with regulators, academia and wider stakeholders. If you scroll to the next slide, please. So today the EI is home to a range of collaborative initiatives, including G+, which is the Global Offshore Wind Health and Safety Organisation, and Safety On, the Onshore Wind Health and Safety Organisation. Both Safety On and G+ have 4 key work areas, which include incident data reporting, the development and publication of good practice guidelines, safe by design workshops, and learning from shared incidents. And members of both organisations also set the general direction of the Wind Turbine Safety Rules. And to that end, I will now pass over to Mark to give an overview of the Wind Turbine Safety Rules, Operational Safety Rules Group and the Steering Committee.
Thank you, Emma. On to the next slide, please. So just a small introduction to the Wind Turbine Safety Rules. The Wind Turbine Safety Rules are a model set of safety rules and procedures to help formalise a safe system of work and help manage significant risk associated with both offshore and onshore wind turbines. They've been developed by both wind turbine owners and wind farm owners and operators, the purpose to achieve both general safety and safety from the system. The direction in which for the wind turbine safety rules and the rule set is set by Safety On and G+, the Offshore Wind Health and Safety Organisation. And how that works is structured in the next slide. Go to the next slide. So how that works, there's a group called the OSRG, the Operational Safety Renewables Group. And within that group, there's participation from all of the members for the companies listed on this slide. And we gather together every 3 months to discuss how the rules are working, whether there's any updates or modifications, and to keep the wind turbine safety rules relevant. We also feed that information into the Wind Turbine Safety Rules Steering Committee, and the Steering Committee are there to manage that we're all going in the right direction and that we're aligned, and we continue to develop the Wind Turbine Safety Rules and the support and procedures as expected. There's also different other routes. So there's the Technical Advisory Committee from Safety On and the Focal Group from G+. They too feed back into this steering committee and have some representation in that committee. And this can also feed back from the Safety On Leadership Board and the G+ Board of Directors. So we've got a number of different routes from all the member companies as well as these areas to put feedback into the wind turbine safety rules and help us to keep them relevant in the constant development. Next slide, please. So the wind turbine safety rules also have some support procedures. So we're currently on the 4th edition of the wind turbine safety rules, and the support procedures are listed below, and they go from P1 to P8. So P1 being approval of general provisions, special instructions, i.e. the GP3 procedure. P2 being the approved tools and equipment process. P3, objections on the grounds of safety. P4, addition and removal of safety rules and plant and LV apparatus. P5, temporary application of an alternative safe system of work, so the TAS process. P6, appointment of persons. P7, boundary control management and cross-boundary safety precautions between the wind turbine safety rules and other safety rules, which we'll be running through the recent update in this webinar. And P8, the procedure for approval of electronic safety documents. They're all managed by the OSR group and updated in line with the wind turbine safety rules. So what have we been doing within the OSRG recently? So the most up-to-date publications has been around P5, which is the TAS process. That's recently been updated and republished, and we've also done a webinar explaining the changes. And the work that we're currently ongoing is Support Procedure 6. We've been going through a review and update process for Support Procedure 6, which is the appointment of persons, and that will soon be updated and published, and a webinar to follow. Then there's the Wind Turbine System Safety Rules and its support procedures, a new process alongside the Wind Turbine Safety Rules. This covers, this extends the boundary down to the HV application, and there'll be some future webinars to explain that when we roll those documentations and that process out in the future, probably around Q1 in 2026. So I think that's it from me around what we are working on the OSRG and the structure of the wind turbine safety rules and the process. I'll now hand this over to Steve to run through the updates and changes for Support Procedure 7. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Mark. we okay to go on to the first slide, Andrea? So I would like to give you a bit of an overview of the P7 and why it was changed and the updates on it. So just looking at this first slide here, we're looking at the history of the P7. So what is the P7? The P7 is the control and management of cross-boundary safety precautions between the wind turbine safety rules and other safety rules. So primarily it's the wind turbine safety rules and other rules. So as such, that's why we're here today. The initial document, when you look at the change log, was created in 2015. That document then had a couple of changes over the years, primarily in probably 2019. At that time, we moved over from RUK to safety on. So that was the main reasons for that in 2019. Moving on to 2021, it then, due to the 4th edition coming online, it was updated again to that. And then finally, in 2024, it was updated to revision 5, which is the current revision it's in now. Why was it changed? I suppose the main reasons was feedback from AEs in regards to issues that were prevalent on site. There was concerns over the content of the documents being too complicated to interpret. So we looked at that as part of the OSRG group. And there was also concerns about the document itself and the implementation and compliance. So as turbines became bigger and also wind farms became bigger, the P7 itself, we felt, had to move on as well. I don't know whether you can go on to the next slide, Andrea, please. So the purpose, if you look in section 1 on the purpose, the Wind Turbine Safety Rules Support Procedure details the process to be followed when working across safety boundaries using the Wind Turbine Safety Rules, WTSR. The implementation of this support procedure does not relieve any one of its statutory duties under country-specific health and safety legislation. So that is what it says in the document. So to provide principal guidance of cross-boundary safety precautions between the wind turbine safety rules and other set of rules, primarily that would probably be HV set of rules. It also is to allow organizations to follow a process when working across the safety boundaries when using WTSR. Again, it was a response to cross-boundary work between Company A, WTSR, and a set of boundary safety rules, and it should be to be followed when it is necessary to implement more than one set of safety rules simultaneously at a given wind farm. Okay, that's in section 1 of the document. Yeah, if you want to go on to the next slide, Andrea. Okay. So this is looking at the scope, and it's probably quite critical as well, that the support procedure shall be followed whenever it is necessary to implement more than one set of safety rules simultaneously, as stated before, as any given wind farm, in order to achieve safety from the system. Credible scenarios within the scope of the procedure include, and there's 2 different scenarios here. So where there's isolation required under the boundary safety rules as part of the required safety precautions to work under or testing under the company a WTSR. So an example of that would be an LV boundary breaker that is under WTSR. The second scenario would be where an isolation is required under the Company A wind turbine safety rules as part of required safety precautions for work on or testing under the boundary safety rules. So again, an example of that would be where we were doing transformer inspection, or maybe some HV maintenance that requires isolations under the wind turbine safety rules. And again, they're to be followed simultaneously. Okay, we go on to the next slide. So what have we changed on the P7 compared to the previous one? The first thing what was changed was there's now an additional method for the application of cross-boundary precautions for work under the boundary safety rules. We can go into a little bit more of that in a minute with the flow charts. There's also an addition of a confirmation of isolation certificate. We call that a CIC. And then following on from that, there's some examples of CICs and some examples of AWPs that are stated in the P7 document. So we go through the appendices. So appendices A is an example of a confirmation of isolation certificate. So that could be used by the AEs when they are creating the documentation. Appendix B is an isolation, an example of an AWP, but an isolation on the boundary side of work under WTSR, where there's no boundary safety rules, safety document issued. There's also an Appendix C, which again is an example of an AWP for isolation on the boundary safety rules for work under WTSR. In this scenario, the boundary safety rules, safety documents would be issued, and they would be for work under WTSR when on a boundary break, as I mentioned before. The next two scenarios would be where the work is on the HV side of the system. So again, Appendix D is an example AWP isolation on the WTSR side of the side for work under the boundary system rules where there's no WTSR CIC issued. And the final example of an AWP is Appendix E. On this one is an isolation on the WTSR side for work under the boundary safety rules where a CIC is issued. Then finally, there was two updated flow charts. Appendix F, which again we'll go through, is a flow chart for the application of the cross-boundary safety precautions, and Appendix G was a flow chart for the removal of cross-boundary safety precautions. Again, these are worked examples to provide the AEs with examples of documentation and a flow chart as well. So we go on to the next slide and we can look at the first flow chart. So looking on Appendix F here, this is a flow chart for the application of cross-boundary safety precautions. It needs to be noted, I suppose, in the document on section 5.2, it's critical that in the document, basically the AE and the AP shall discuss and agree the putting together of this document, and part of that would be the isolations on both sides of the HV and WTSR side of the boundaries. So they need to agree, they shall agree that. The safety documents applicable and the signatures, etc. So again, that could be examples of Appendix B, C, D, and E. Security of the isolations and the safety keys involved, whether that's dual isolations and things like that. And finally, the potential issues, I would say, for general safety. So there could be issues with the turbine or the environment that need to be taken into account. They've all got to be agreed prior to us starting the document. I'll start on the flow here. So if we look on the flow chart of this document here, you see a green side and a blue side. So we take the green side first, which is the left-hand side. We are actually looking at section 6 of the P7 document. So section 6 looks at isolations on the boundary side of the work for work under WTSR. So we need an isolation on the boundary side of the HV side of things for work on WTSR. So following the document through, the flowchart through, sorry, the AE approves the AWP to establish and maintain agreed boundary safety rules isolations for work under WTSR. The AT then obtains AWP and contacts the OC for transfer of control. The AT contacts the AP to apply points of isolation and confirms whether a boundary safety rules safety document will be issued. At this point, there is whether two methods that we're looking at. So if you look at method 1, this would be in terms of if there's a boundary safety rules document to be issued or not. So we look at method 1, the AP applies isolation on the boundary safety rules system witnessed by the AT. Retention of the safety keys is carried out. If there's no safety key issued, then the AP then the AT use a hasp and a dual lock. The AP signs the AWP against each boundary safety rules isolation applied. The AT signs each signature point on the AWP to the normal manner. Okay, and again on the second is if it's a yes, so go back to the flow chart again. The AT contacts the AP to apply points of isolation and confirms whether a boundary safety rules safety documents will be issued. In this case, going on to method 2, there is a document to be issued, and say we follow that method 2. So the AT applies the isolations on the boundary safety rules system and provides a boundary safety rules safety document. At that point, the AP provides boundary safety rules safety documents and safe key to the AT. The AT records the boundary safety rules safety documents number on the AWP. The AP retains the boundary safety rules safety documents and the keys for dual control in their safe custody. And then finally, on that one, the authorized technician carries out work in accordance with the AWP and WTSR. So it is slightly complicated. If you go to the right-hand side of things, so this is the blue section of the document, the flow chart. This is covered on section 7 of the document, of the P7 document. In particular, this would be point 7.4 and 7.5. Okay, credible scenarios for this would be a transformer inspection and HV maintenance under the boundary safety rules. Okay, just going back onto so this, if we spoke before about the different appendices and documents you would use for this. So if a CIC was issued, we would use section 7.4, which would be the method 1. We can go through that in a minute. And then if an AWP and if no CIC was issued, method 1, and the second scenario would be appendix E and the CIC document, that would be in point 7.5 of the document, and this would be method 2. So briefly going through the flow chart on that. So the AE approves the AWP to establish and maintain agreed WTSR isolations for work under the boundary safety rules. The AP contacts the AT and requests an isolation on the WTSR system. The AT obtains AWP and carries out transfer of control. The next step here is a decision box. WTSR confirmation of isolation certificate to be issued. So if we go down with a no on that, so if there's no CIC to be issued, then we follow method 1, which again would be appendices D on the AWP example. At this point, the AT applies isolations as per the AWP on WTSR system. The application of the isolations shall be witnessed by the AP. The AP signs the AWP. The AWP can now be surrendered or held in safe custody by the AT. And again, that follows on across. I'll just move on to method 2. Again, we go back to the decision box. WTSR confirmation of isolation certificate to be issued. In this scenario, there's a confirmation CIC to be issued. So the AT applies an isolation as per the AWP on the WTSR system and issues a CIC to the AP. Again, that would be appendices E and the CIC document in this method. Okay, the AWP signs on, the AP signs onto the AWP, confirm receipts of the CIC and the key safe key. The AP retains CIC and the key for the duration of the work. The AWP can now be surrendered or held in safe custody. And then the final part of this, the boundary safety rules, appointed person carries out the work in accordance with the boundary safety rules. Okay, so if you could move on to the next slide. So this next slide here would be the flowchart for the removal of the cross-boundary safety rules, cross-boundary safety precautions. Again, it's colored green and blue to define what we're actually doing. So again, it's critical in 5.2 of the document that the AE and the AP shall agree on the process for this. Again, just to run you through that again, the isolations on both the HV side and the HV side and WTSR side of the boundaries, safety documents that are applicable and the signatures required, security of the isolations and the safety keys, and the potential for general safety issues. So again, if you look at this flow chart, which is appendices G in the document, we can go on the left hand side. So the green section follows sections 6.9 and 6.10 of the P7, when WTSR is the primary set of rules. Again, scenarios for this, going back before, would be replacements or work on a boundary circuit breaker under WTSR. So appendices B is the document we follow where there's no boundary safety rules documents issued on this one. So that would be method 1, and AWP appendices C is 6.10 of the document where a boundary safety rules document is issued. That would be method 2. So we could go through the flow chart again on this one. So the AT clears and cancels the AWP. Again, this is on your left-hand side of the document in the green. The AT contacts the AP to request and agree removal of boundary safety rules isolations. The boundary safety rules safety document to be issued. If that's a no, again, we follow method 1, which I just briefly went over then. So that would be appendices B of the document, where there's no CIC, no boundary safety rules document to be issued, and that'd be method 1. AP carries out removal of the boundary safety rules isolations, and that's witnessed by the AT. The AP signs the AWP for removal of the boundary safety rules isolations. The AP confirms that boundary safety rules system has been restored to its normal operation and condition. Following that on, the AT signs signature checkpoints on the AWP for removal of the remaining WTSR isolations, and then we go to the end. If we go back to the decision box, is the boundary safety rules safety document issued? If that's a yes, then the AT clears and returns the boundary safety rules safety document and key to the AP. The AP cancels the boundary safety rules safety document and removes the boundary safety rules isolations, confirming with the AT that the boundary safety rules system has been restored to its normal state. Then we move on to the AT signs the signature checkpoints on the AWP for removal of the remaining isolations. And then we can go to the AT returns the wind turbine to its normal operational state. So that would be if going back to the top of that flow chart, when work is completed on the WTSR and the boundary safety rules isolations are to be removed. So if we then move on to the right hand side of the flow chart on Appendix G, we can go through that. So again, this is the blue section which follows 7.8 and 7.9 of the P7. In this case, the boundary safety rules are the primary set of rules. So the credible scenarios, again, just to confirm that, would be a transformer inspections or HV maintenance under the boundary safety rules. With this, we would use appendices D if there is no CIC to be issued, so that would be the one flowing straight away down the flow chart. And if we were to use a CIC, we would also use appendices E, follow 7.9 of the document, and this would be method 2. So I'll just briefly go through them again for the removal. So that when work is completed under the boundary safety rules, WTSR isolations to be removed. So in this case, the AP contacts the AT and requests removal of the WTSR isolations. The AT removes the AWP from safe custody and contacts the AT to reissue. Again, we've got this decision box which we've just gone through here, so I'll just follow where the WTSR CIC is issued. If we say no to one being issued, then the AP, this would be method 1, and the AP signs the AWP to confirm that isolations can be removed. AT clears and cancels the AWP, and the AT removes WTSR isolations witnessed by the AP. So that would be the method 1 route. If we now move on to the method 2 route, which is if a CIC is issued, this would be again method 2. So the AP clears this WTSR CIC and returns it with the safe key to the AT. The AT cancels the CIC. The AT clears and cancels the AWP and removes WTSR isolations in accordance with the AWP. And then we can finally go to the bottom there. The AT returns wind turbine to operational state in accordance with AWP and contacts the OC to enact a transfer of control. So they are the two flowcharts that are in the P7 document. So that would be appendices F and appendices G. So Andrea, I don't know whether you can go on to the next slide. It's the final slide. So what are the benefits of this? I suppose if we went back to 2015 when the document was first issued, AEs brought up issues regarding that, in particular about in cases where we couldn't follow the P7 document. In particular, there might be cases where the likes of APs were unable to climb, as an example. So this would give that option with the CIC document to be able to, so that can be followed, so AE can follow an approved process for that. So in this case, there's an additional method for work under the boundary safety rules. This is the CIC. It's a more efficient process for cross-boundary work. As stated earlier, there's wind farms are getting bigger, turbines are getting bigger. So I think this is now a more efficient process for doing cross-boundary work. Ensures agreements between the AE and the AP for work or testing across safety rule boundaries. And again, this document addition of a confirmation of isolation certificate, the CIC. This has already been in place within some members of the OSRG group anyway. So some companies have followed this previously. So again, this is something that is a worked example anyway. And then finally, the CIC documents can be prepared in advance by the AE, ensuring that the correct boundary points, isolations are written by the AE and not written by the AT. So in a way, it's more difficult for the AT to write something incorrectly. The AE is specifically stating what isolations they are putting in, and that would be prepared in advance during again the section 5 with the AE and the AP to confirm that. So that's when that would be done on there. So I think that's the final slide I got there. So I don't know whether I pass it on to you, Mark, for questions or
yeah, thank you very much, Steve. We do have a couple of questions in, so just a reminder to everybody on the call that you can go onto the Q&A function at the bottom, click on that and input your comments and add your questions, and we'll try and catch them. So let's start with the questions. First one, as an AP, I am not signing any part of an AWP. I have not necessarily got knowledge of the wind turbine safety rules and no idea of what the company's management instructions with regards to what responsibilities they put on me. So I think, Steve, we've had this conversation. So when we were developing the updates to P7, we went through quite a lot of scenarios and quite a lot of information we'd had from the members around the challenges that they'd seen. One of them was that the AP or SAP would refuse to sign the AWP because they felt that they didn't have any competence under the wind turbine safety rules. And we discussed this one quite in depth. And often these discussions all come round to planning and understanding of the tasks and what is the responsibilities of everybody involved. And what needs to be kind of quite clear is that when the AP is signing the AWP, they're only signing to say that they have put the isolations in place. There isn't any extra responsibilities towards the wind turbine safety rules at all. They're just saying, I have applied my isolations, and that is a section on the AWP. And then there might be a section later on to say that they have removed those isolations. You don't need wind turbine safety rules training or knowledge or competence to be able to put your signature in that box. It's very similar to if you were an SAP or an AP working on another boundary discussion, and somebody might issue you an isolation and earthing certificate, in which case you would be asked to sign to say that your isolations are in place, but it could be a different company's document. So my advice with following P7, and when you know that this work is going to happen, is consider how well this job is planned. You need to make sure the HV contractor understands what they're there for and what they are expected from them. Do they need to put an isolation? Do they need to climb? Will they see a CIC document? Do they need to sign the AWP? And an explanation of what is involved in that needs to be quite clear to everybody. So I think that's the most important part of it. There shouldn't be a reason why an AP shouldn't sign onto an AWP to purely say, I have just applied the points of isolation that you need from me. So I think that's the most important step, is around planning. Next question. Under what scenarios would a decision be made to not issue an isolation safety document when implementing cross-boundary safety precautions, i.e. when to apply method 1 and when to apply method 2? I think, Steve, you'll probably agree that this is covered in the flowcharts, when you would need to apply method 1.
Yes.
And you would need to apply method 2.
Yeah, there's obviously work on WTSR side of the boundary, and then there's work on the HV side of the boundary. So there's obviously a flowchart for each of them scenarios, and within them, the flowchart is a decision box then, whether you on the HV side of things you actually issue a boundary safety rules document or not. If you don't, then you follow one route. If you do, you can follow the other route. And again, the same with the CIC, or for if you're working on the HV work. So them decisions are followed by the flowchart. I suppose I think the document probably goes into detail on that, so probably that's where you need to follow. So section 6 would be for work on the WTSR side of the boundary, and section 7 would be for work under the HV side of the boundary, and that flowchart would and should help you with them decision boxes.
Yeah, and again, it's about understanding the expectations from the HV contractor, as well as what's documented here under this process around the wind turbine safety rules. If the HV contractor is purely there to put isolations in for the work to be done the other side of the boundary under the wind turbine safety rules, they might choose that they don't need to issue a safety document. They just need to confirm that these points of isolations have been applied. It's just, you need to understand how each side of the boundary, each of those processes are going to work, and agree that that is the correct way. But with this process, we're given options of how to do it. A couple of different options which should be well suited for these type of tasks. For high voltage service, we have tasks which sit both sides of the boundary. Currently, this work is managed under an AWP with the HV isolations agreed by the AP. How would you recommend we proceed based on each scenario described? Should this be an isolation certificate with ACIC. I would imagine that this question comes from the fact that the HV contractor is issuing an isolation certificate, which is highlighting the isolations that they've made. So that's documented on the isolation certificate. The CIC, realistically, the CIC is there so that if the SAP didn't have the competence to climb the tower, then you could use the CIC and agree that those points of isolation have been applied and that you've been issued a key. Again, this is about planning and understanding the task, because there will be HV safety rules that don't allow the SAP to accept such a document and not accept isolations that they haven't visually confirmed or equally secured themselves. So again, you can't assume that your HV contractor is going to automatically comply with this process that's documented here. And if they come without the full competence to be able to climb, if you need to climb to apply the points of isolation, then you need to understand that and understand how to deal with the process. So when there's works on both sides of the boundary, this process is for the wind turbine safety rules work on the work side of the boundary. The work on the HV side of the boundary would, in my view, be managed by the HV process. So there could be two separate documents, two separate agreements from the working party. But again, sounds like that needs planning quite well and understand what everybody needs to do. I think there was a follow-up to one of the questions around the AP sign and the AWP, and that there needs to highlight on the AWP that the signature from the AP is purely there to confirm that they've applied the points of isolation. And the comment here is that needs to be highlighted on the AWP, and I totally agree, and I think it should be very clear on that section, on that box that you are signing for, that you, as the AP, are putting your signature there to confirm that you have applied the points of isolation. And that is what that box should be worded in some way or the other. So that's
I think if you, Mark, if you go to the different appendices, then in each case where there needs to be a signature, I think that should be stated. It does say that obviously the documentation can change slightly from the agreed process or AWP, but I suppose one thing to take into consideration that on the original P7 document, it was also stated that the AP signs in different sections. So this shouldn't be considered something new. This was already in the document that was going back to 2015. So if you look in Appendix B, for instance, for the application, it just says here, the AP shall sign the declaration on the AWP to confirm the boundary safety rules isolations have been applied. So he's just confirming, or she's just confirming again. So that's the different scenarios there. And yeah.
Also in section 5, where it talks about the preparation of an AWP for cross-boundary isolation, section 5.2, then there is a stage in there that says the AWP shall have provision for the AP to sign a declaration stating that points of isolation have been applied using their safety rules. So, and again, when they remove it as well, once that's been carried out. So should be two clear boxes where the AP can very clearly see that they are just signing to say they have applied their isolations under their own rules. Okay, I'll just quickly check chat. No, everything is covered in the questions. We don't seem to have any more questions. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining the webinar. Thank you for Emma and Steve for your input throughout the slides. And for those that put the questions in, thank you very much for the questions. If you feel that there's any more questions you would like to ask, please reach out to your authorised engineers in your companies. They have a forum to be able to ask questions up into the Operational Safety Renewables group, where we can bring that forward. And also, if there is within your company someone who's representing your company in the OSRG, then bring any questions, queries or concerns around this process or any other processes to them, and they'll bring them up in the meeting where we will actively discuss them and consider what we should do going forward. So thank you very much for joining, and see you soon.